Okay, so today we're going to be factoring trinomials part 2. We did part 1 previously, and now we're going to do part 2. Now remember we talked on part 1 that we didn't have to use the box when we have a coefficient of 1 here, but when you have a number greater than 1 on your very first term, then you need to use the box. So here we have a 2, here we have a 6, down here we have a 1. But why do we have to use a box here? Because it has two variables. So if it has two different variables, you also have to use a box. And then on number 4, again, it has a greater than 1. So we need to use the x in the box on each of these. So I'm going to make my x. Remember, it's the first term times the last term. That's what goes at the top. You got your 4. 2 times 2 is 4. The middle term right here is what we add together to get. It's 5. Two numbers that multiply together to give me 4, but add together to give me 5. So I have either 4 or 1 or 2 and 2. And 4 and 1 is going to work because 4 times 1 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. We need to put our variables. In this case, it's a y on both sides. Okay, now we're going to make our box. Okay, at the top left-hand corner, right here, we put our first term, which is 2y squared. The last term always goes down here. These two boxes are your sides of your x. So it's y here and 4y here. And it doesn't matter which one you put. You could put 4y here and y here. Doesn't matter. Okay, the next step is factoring. Okay, so I'm going to factor up this way. Well, what do these have in common? Well, one has a y and one has a 2. They have nothing. When they have nothing, it's really a 1. Okay, now I'm going to factor this way. What do these have in common? Well, they both have a y, and they both have a 2. Okay, now I'm going to go, and I'm going to go this way. What do these have in common? Well, they both have a 2. And then I'm going to go this way. What do these two have in common? They both have a y. Okay, the sign that is between, or the sign that's in this box goes here. In this case, it's a positive, so this goes plus. And the sign in this box is a positive, so it's plus. So our answer is 2y plus 1 times y plus 2. And that's our answer for that one. Alright, next one. Again, we see that the coefficient is 6, so therefore we have to use the x and the box. So I'm going to go ahead and divide this. I'm going to make my x. Okay, the top of our x is going to be our first term times our last term. So 6 times 7, that's 42. The middle term is what we add up to be negative 23. So two numbers that multiply together to give me a negative 20, or multiply together to give me a positive 42, but when you add them together, it gives me a negative 23. Well, if I want a positive answer, and then when they add up to be negative, I know they both need to be negative. Okay, so two numbers that multiply together to give me 42, but add together to give me 23. Okay, so I need to kind of go through here and say, okay, well, I know I'm not sure, it doesn't pop out to me like this one, the first one did. So I would probably go 1 and 42. Okay, it gives me 42, but doesn't give me 23. 2 and 21. Oh, 2 times 21 is 42. Okay, so did I find it? So if I multiply 21 times 2 is 42, and if I make them both negative, it adds up to be 23. Negative. Oh, good. Okay, so I found it. So I have 2. Where's my cursor? Okay, so I have 2 here we go, and a 21. I put my variables, in this case it's an n, and now I'm ready to make my box. Because now when I multiply these together, I get positive 42. When I add them together, I get negative 23. Now I'm going to do my box. Okay, so I've got my first term, which is 6n squared. My last term, which is 7, that's where they go. My side of my x go here, negative 21n and negative 2n. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to factor. I'm going to factor this way. So what do they have in common? They both have a 7. What do these have in common? They have an n, and they also have a 2. Then I'm going to factor the other direction. What do these have in common? A 7 and a 2, so again nothing, so that's going to be a 1. And then I'm going to factor this way. What do these have in common? They have an n. Okay, so then they're not even, so it's not a 2. How about a 3? 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 7 is 21. So it looks to me like they have a 3. So now the sign comes from the sign that's right in this box, and that's a negative. And this sign comes from this box, and that's a negative. So my answer is 2n minus 7 and 3n minus 1. Okay, so I got that one. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the next one. And again, we need to do the x in the box. Why? Because there's two different variables. So I'm going to do my x. So again, it's invisible 1. 1 times 24 is 24. Add together to give me 11. So two numbers that will multiply together to give me 24, but add together to give me 11. 8 and 3. I put both variables here, the x and the y. The x and the y. Create my box. Okay, so create your box. Okay. Alright, so now the first term goes in this box. The last term will go in this box. These two will go wherever you want to put them, but remember they both have to have both variables. Okay, we're going to factor, start where you want. I'm going to go ahead and start here. What do these have in common? Well, they both have a 3 and they both have a y. What do these have in common? They have just an x. Then I'm going to do this way. Green. Go this way. What do these have in common? They both have an x. What do these have in common? They both have an 8 and they have a y. The sign comes from this box, it's a plus. The sign comes from this box, it's a plus. So our answer is x plus 3y and then x plus 8y. And that's our factored form for that one. Okay, now we are going to look at this number 4. Number 4, we have to factor. But one thing you have to do before you factor is you have to look to see, is there anything that we can take out that they all have in common? So if we look at 2, a 12, and a 10, is there anything that all three of those have in common? And there is. There's a 2. So I'm going to do that. So that's your very first thing before you start factoring, is to look to see if there's anything they all three terms have in common as far as numbers or letters. Okay, so now if I take that out, I have a y squared left. 2 times what is going to give me a negative 12? It's a negative 6. and I have a y. 2 times what is going to give me a 10, and that's going to be a positive 5. Okay, so now I'm only going to now factor what's in parentheses. I keep the 2 because the 2 is going to be part of my answer for later. But now I'm going to make my x in my box, if I need a box, with this one. So now 1 times 5 is 5. That's my first term and my last term. Add together to give me a negative 6. Okay, two numbers that will multiply together to give me 5, but when you add them together will give me a negative 6. So they're both going to be negative, because negative and negative is a positive, and it's going to be 5 and 1. Now, do I need to do a box when I have a coefficient of 1 here on the term or the equation that I'm factoring? I don't. So I'm all done. I can just put my parentheses and say x minus 5 and x minus 1. And this is my answer right here, including that 2 that we took out at the very beginning. Okay, so we need to look at that to see if we can take anything out before we factor. And if we can, we should, because then it makes our problem much easier. That is Factoring Trinomials, Part 2.